Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we are taking, well, arguably the most ruthless strategic framework ever devised, Machiavellian philosophy, and applying its lessons. But not to nations.
Not to nations, no. We're
Yet.
applying it to the conquest of the human heart. It's quite a shift in focus.
It really is. And I want to start us off with the truly provocative idea pulled straight from the material we looked at. What is it that makes us crave some people while ignoring others? Why does desire burn brightest, not in safety, but in danger, in mystery, in the unknown?
Yeah, that framing immediately tells you this isn't your typical conversation about, luck or destiny or soulmates. Our mission today is pretty intricate.
Right.
We're here to analyze the strategic principles of attraction by drawing these, well, direct and frankly undeniable parallels between political mastery and mastering desire. We're going to really unpack a framework the material calls Machiavelli's 5 Laws of Seduction.
And let's be clear, this isn't about romance novels.
Not at all. This is a deep dive into power, perception, and strategy. Pure strategy.
Absolutely. We are approaching attraction not as some, ethereal random force, but as something measurable, predictable, almost an art form, the art of ruling desire.
Exactly. And the analysis is incredibly stark about its core premise. It argues that the human heart, much like, say, the population of a state in Machiavelli's time, isn't ruled by lofty reason.
No, it's ruled by much more predictable human flaws, right? The sources pinpoint weakness, vanity, and fear.
Oh. And if you connect that directly back to Machiavelli's political philosophy, that premise really holds up, doesn't it?
Yeah.
He was an observer of humanity as it is, not as we might wish it to be.
Uh-huh.
He advised rulers based on that universal tendency of people to be, I'm quoting him loosely here, ungrateful, fickle, false, cowardly, covetous.
Yeah.
So if people are governed by these, let's say, self-serving emotions in the political arena, it's strategically naive, according to this view, to assume they suddenly become purely rational and virtuous when it comes to attraction.
It's a consistent view of human nature, then. And the text we reviewed, it provides this detailed, almost brutal blueprint for anyone who wants to achieve maybe clarity and command in these really high-stakes human interactions.
But before we jump into the laws themselves, we absolutely have to stress the crucial caveat. It's right there, anchoring the whole strategic manual.
Okay, what's the warning?
Well, the framework is presented as offering both empathy and warning. Which is interesting. The control over desire they describe, it's seen as a significant, potent gift. But one that the material emphasizes can, and I quote, destroy the careless wielder. We're talking about powerful tools of influence here.
Right.
And understanding them means acknowledging just how sharp they are. They demand self-command first and foremost.
Okay, so let's really unpack this foundation. Why does this strategy-first approach supposedly trump pure emotion? And what are those core psychological drivers we need to get a handle on?
Okay, so when you look around, at relationships, most people talk about things like chemistry or maybe just being yourself.
Right.
That's the common
Key
advice.
standard advice, yeah.
But the strategic view we're examining today, it just completely strips away that romantic veneer. It defines seduction not as some happy accident, but as a form of, well, mastery. What's the real difference there between just falling into attraction and actually mastering it?
I think the difference boils down to agency, control. The romantic view kind of leaves you at the mercy of fate or, the subjective whims of another person. You're constantly reacting to them.
Okay.
The strategic view, though, which is directly rooted in Machiavellian thought, insists that just like a prince has to master the art of ruling his subjects.
Right.
The individual must master the art of ruling desire. The desire of others, yes, but fundamentally their own desire first. That's the starting point. So the goal isn't solely about grabbing someone else's attention. The primary step, the foundation, is self-mastery. It's about achieving this kind of intentionality that frees you from being, as the text says, ruled by passion, or becoming the slave of another's whims.
Exactly. It's framed as a liberation from emotional servitude.
That makes sense.
Because if you're operating without any kind of strategic roadmap, you just become vulnerable. Machiavelli himself taught that a ruler should never rely on the goodwill of others, only on their own power, their own resources. Similarly, if you understand the mechanics of attraction, this view argues you're far less likely to fall victim to emotional manipulation or just really unstable dynamics.
Okay, so let's get into those core drivers, the material highlights. It says the strategy leverages, or maybe just acknowledges, these fundamental aspects of the human heart: weakness, vanity, and fear. Let's define these because they seem critical.
They are the levers, basically.
Right. So when we talk about weakness, we're not talking about moral failure, are we? It's more about inherent vulnerability.
Exactly. Those hidden needs we all have for support, for affirmation, maybe even just an escape from the mundane, the routine, things we carry around. The material calls them the cracks in our emotional armor.
Okay, cracks. And then vanity. That seems pretty universal.
Oh, absolutely. Perhaps the most universally exploitable driver, according to this framework. It's that deep-seated need we have for validation, that desire to see ourselves reflected back as desirable, unique, powerful even. Vanity is described as the emotional engine fueling our pride, making it susceptible to, well, carefully measured praise. A prince knows men are easily swayed by flattery.
Right.
And the strategy of attraction is really no different in that regard.
And the third one, fear. What kind of fear are we talking about? Not physical harm, presumably.
No, not usually. It's more the anxiety of loss, the fear of abandonment, or maybe just insignificance, that sort of existential dread that motivates us to cling tightly to anything that seems to offer stability or promise.
So weakness, vanity, fear. Not necessarily negative traits in this context, but simply the levers of human motivation that can be well used.
Precisely. And the power dynamic shifts completely when you adopt this lens. The analysis suggests that by clearly understanding and crucially commanding the rhythm of attraction, you move out of that reactive state.
You become proactive.
Exactly. Proactive clarity. You're no longer just stumbling into interactions hoping for the best. You're calculating your presence, your absence, your impact based on these observed psychological realities.
So the ultimate goal then, it sounds like, has to be achieving that profound self-command first. That allows you to dictate the tempo of any connection you decide to enter.
Yes. That separation from your own emotional urgency, that's the real source of power here, according to the material.
That kind of detachment must be mandatory for this to work.
It is, because the 5 strategic laws we're about to get into, they're intense. They require focus, sustained observation, and critically, that ability to resist indulging your own emotions when they might compromise the overall strategy.
Okay, that foundational mindset is clear. Let's move right into the first 2 strategic laws. These seem to govern that initial stage perception and value, how you build that initial pull. All right, Law 1. This one immediately clashes with the modern obsession with transparency and, frankly, oversharing. It's conceal your true intentions.
Right out of the gate, yeah.
Why? Why cling to mystery? According to this framework, revealing everything just kills intrigue. It argues intrigue needs doubt, not certainty. We have to resist that urge to present ourselves fully formed, completely transparent.
And this is pure Machiavelli, isn't it? It's a cornerstone of effective governance in his view. He advised a prince to cultivate the appearance of virtue.
The appearance, right?
But always retain the ability to act other ways when needed. And crucially, never reveal his true long-term plans, even to his inner circle. Otherwise, they become predictable, or worse, they could betray him.
So the seducer applies the same logic.
Exactly. The moment the other person feels they get you too quickly, too easily, the material says they've effectively weighed you, measured you, and discarded you. You've become predictable. Game over, in a sense.
What's interesting, though, is that the technique isn't just about being silent or shutting down. They could just come across as aloof or cold, right?
Yeah, that's not it. It's more subtle.
It seems to be about planting a question in the other person's mind, a question that then grows into fascination. The material describes mystery as skillful suggestion, not outright declaration.
Suggestion, yes. Every glance, every carefully chosen piece of information you share should hint at something deeper, something potentially complicated or powerful underneath. Ever just lay it all out.
It's a sophisticated maneuver, then. It leverages the mind's natural tendency to fill in blanks, doesn't it?
Absolutely. It's like creating a vacuum. By skillfully withholding your true fixed motives why you're really there, what you truly want long-term, you compel others to wonder, to guess, to chase answers.
Because they need to resolve the uncertainty.
Exactly. If you leave gaps in your story or your behavior, the listener's imagination, as the source puts it, must labor to fill the gaps. And, driven by their own vanity, they inevitably fill those gaps with the most flattering, exciting possibilities about your depth, your worth, your intentions.
I see the power play there. Desire is born of doubt. It's not the, blinding spotlight of full disclosure that tempts.
No.
It's the compelling, maybe even dark shadow of potential. It forces the listener to project their own desires onto you.
Precisely. And that shadow is strategic power. Concealment here isn't defined as simple dishonesty, like lying. It's about maintaining strategic asymmetry, information asymmetry.
You know something they don't, which is your true aim.
Right. If they think they've figured you out, the game ends. You become a known quantity, solvable. This framework is crystal clear. The power isn't in who you are, necessarily, but in the compelling uncertainty of what you might be. It keeps the energy, the focus flowing towards you.
Okay, so once that shadow of mystery is cast, the next law seems to ensure that the pursuit feels important, consequential. Hashtag 2.2. Law 2, appear as a prize to be won.
Which brings us to Law 2. Appear as a prize to be won.
This feels like pure social psychology in action. It leverages that, well, maybe uncomfortable truth that Machiavelli certainly understood. People, men and women alike, tend to follow the herd.
It's the principle of social proof, basically. We desire what others already seem to desire. It's the basic law of value scarcity or perceived scarcity increases worth. What's sought after instantly becomes more precious.
It sounds cynical, but you see it everywhere.
It's perhaps the most cynical observation in the framework, but also maybe the most consistently effective, historically speaking. Very few people are genuinely drawn, initially at least, to the unclaimed or the apparently unwanted. Most are drawn to those who already seem admired, desired, validated by others. If we connect this back to the bigger picture of power, it's about creating visible, active demand for your presence.
It's like building buzz. The material calls it the theater of desirability.
Good phrase.
Yeah. This law requires actively surrounding yourself with clear, tangible signals of desirability. You have to appear respected, sought after, maybe even a bit busy, admired by others, colleagues, friends, maybe even hinting at past admirers.
It's not passive. You don't just wait to be discovered.
Yeah.
It's an active reputation management strategy. You're curating your perceived value.
And the mechanism here isn't just about perceived value, is it? It's also introducing rivalry and pride.
Exactly. If you appear sought after, the person you're targeting implicitly feels they need to compete. They need to prove themselves worthy against this perceived competition, real or imagined. The material states it directly. Rivalry sharpens attraction. It immediately shifts the emotional burden and often the physical burden of effort onto them. They have to work to get your attention.
So you're communicating without saying a word that your time, your attention, your presence, they're valuable commodities. They have to be earned, competed for.
Yes, and the framework warns very specifically against being too easily won. The idea is, if you are, you'll likely be cast aside, because the human mind tends to undervalue anything obtained without significant effort.
The effort justification principle.
That's a part of it, yes. The crucial risk of being too emotionally generous or available too quickly in this strategic model. The objective is, and this sounds harsh, to make the other party exhaust herself trying to claim you.
Wow.
Think about the psychology. The effort they invest is what builds their cognitive commitment and their perceived value of you in their own mind. It loops back.
So Machiavelli's political maxim applies. Reputation builds power faster than truth.
Terrifically. Your perceived status as a valuable, sought-after prize creates the necessary gravitational pull. And often, that pull exists somewhat irrespective of who you truly are beneath the performance. In this initial phase, it's the visible demand that matters most.
Okay, so let's say you've done that. You've created the mystery through concealment. You've established your value as a prize. How do you then sustain the connection and, maybe more importantly, begin to actually exert influence and shape their behavior? That seems like the next level.
Right, and this is where the strategy moves from perception management into active influence. And it presents, I think, the most profound ethical and practical challenge. Law 3. Exploit weakness without pity.
That sounds difficult. The principle is that every heart hides these fundamental weaknesses: vanity, insecurity, some secret hunger for a specific kind of attention. And this, the text argues, is the key to true, deep influence.
It's a ruthless application of statecraft, really. Machiavelli famously taught that a ruler must study the flaws and weaknesses of his subjects, their ambition, their greed, whatever it is, to predict their actions and gain control.
Know your audience, essentially.
But on a deeper, more manipulative level, yes. Similarly, the seducer, in this model, must observe not just what's openly shown, but what's hidden in the shadows. Those hidden vulnerabilities are the emotional cracks we mentioned earlier.
So it requires really careful listening, doesn't it? Watching for silences, subtle shifts in confidence, noting what subjects they avoid, or what kind of praise they seem to crave most desperately.
Exactly. The core premise is stated as, behind the mask lies the need, and behind the need lies your doorway. You're looking for that thing they desperately want or fear, maybe something they even conceal from themselves.
But I have to push back here a bit. The instruction is without pity. Exploit weakness without pity. Isn't that inherently self-defeating in the long run? If you bind someone to you through their deepest insecurity, their core weakness, doesn't that create a fundamentally unstable, maybe even resentful dynamic? Machiavelli himself warned against being hated. You might gain a hostage, not a loyal follower.
That is the absolute core tension, isn't it? And the text addresses it, but through sheer pragmatism. From this purely strategic viewpoint, pity is seen as a contaminant. It clouds judgment.
So?
Pity involves emotional rescue, right? Which creates dependence, sure, but it also apparently breeds entitlement in the target and ultimately weakens the ruler or the influencer in this case.
Ah.
The material argues quite starkly that pity weakens power. It leads to softness, loss of advantage, because the target stops seeing you as a source of strength or intrigue and starts seeing you more as a caregiver. And caregivers, frankly, are often seen as replaceable once the immediate need is met.
So the strategic goal isn't emotional rescue, it's controlled guidance.
That's a good way to put it, controlled guidance. Once a weakness is identified, let's say, they desperately crave validation because of chronic low self-esteem.
Okay.
The strategy demands you feed it, but with rigorous control. Never fully satisfy it. If they crave validation, the text advises giving it in measured doses, always leaving them slightly hungry for more.
Keeping them on the hook.
Essentially. Or, if they fear abandonment, a really powerful common vulnerability, the advice is to alternate between closeness, then distance, deliberately triggering that fear, then relieving it.
That sounds exactly like psychological conditioning, like intermittent reinforcement.
It shares principles, yes. You provide just enough relief or validation to keep hope alive, but never enough certainty to make the core psychological need just vanish. You maintain the hunger, you maintain the leverage.
So the stated intention is to bind them to you through something they can't easily satisfy elsewhere.
Correct. You guide them deeper into your orbit by becoming the unique source for satisfying a need that maybe no one else even sees, let alone addresses, until the thought of losing your presence becomes a genuine source of distress for them. It's a shift from passive observation to active, controlled intervention in their emotional landscape.
And that control, that calculated giving and taking, leads us directly into the next law, which is about maintaining distance, even once a connection seems established. Hashtag 3.2. Law 4, master the art of strategic withdrawal.
Precisely. Law number 4 tackles what the material sees as a fatal flaw in many intense connections: overindulgence, simple burnout, or boredom.
Right. The idea that the heart grows dull when it's indulged too freely, but it gets restless when it's denied. So constant, easy presence, according to this framework, doesn't breed security. It breeds boredom.
This maps directly onto Machiavelli's advice to rulers about their accessibility.
Yeah.
If the prince is always available, always seen, his presence loses its gravity, its importance. He becomes commonplace.
So you have to measure your presence carefully.
You do. Allow absence to stir longing, to increase anticipation. The moment you become perpetually accessible, you lose leverage. You become, as the text implies, taken for granted, like an ever-present utility rather than a desired object.
So this law is all about establishing a rhythm, a very disciplined rhythm. It's described like the tide, a powerful advance, then a calculated recession.
Push and pull.
Yeah. One day, maybe overwhelming warmth and focus. The next, perhaps, silence. Independence, the subtle implication you have other interests, other demands on your time. What's the specific purpose of this planned absence? Is it just to make them miss you?
It's framed as more than that. Withdrawal is defined in the material as discipline, a form of behavioral training, essentially.
Training them.
Training their desire, yes. It's positioned not as random cruelty, but as a calculated move to compel the other person to chase what they fear losing. When they start expecting your call at a certain time, you delay it just long enough to create that flicker of worry. When they assume your presence at an event, maybe you let them feel a palpable, slightly confusing absence. You're teaching them, subtly, that your attention is a privilege, not an entitlement.
Okay, but how do you find the sweet spot? This seems tricky. Because if you withdraw too much or for too long, couldn't they just get bitter, feel genuinely abandoned, and maybe strategically move on themselves, deciding you're just too unstable or unavailable? That ties back to the sustainability question we raised.
That is the absolute critical balance, and the material is quite specific about the risks. Withdraw when expected, yes, but not for too long, lest they turn bitter and feel permanently discarded. You lose them.
Right.
But also, crucially, not for too short a time, lest they just grow comfortable again, knowing you'll always snap back quickly. The strategic value is lost.
So the tension is key.
Desire, as we established earlier, lives entirely in tension, not in comfort or predictability. This technique, this strategic withdrawal, ensures they never feel quite secure enough to stop actively wanting you, actively working for your presence. If they know exactly when you'll return, the strategic value is completely eliminated. It must always contain that subtle element of potential loss.
Okay. These laws definitely build and regulate tension. But the final law, Law 5, seems the most complex. It deals with maintaining long-term, sustainable control over the heart itself by balancing those two really powerful human motivators. All right, Law 5. This feels like the most direct transposition of Machiavellian statecraft into the realm of attraction. It's basically his famous declaration that a ruler must balance being loved with being feared to command sustainable loyalty.
Exactly. Love alone is seen as fragile, easily broken. Fear alone breeds hatred and eventually rebellion. So to truly hold a heart long-term, this framework argues, you must skillfully ignite hope while simultaneously awakening a kind of existential fear.
It's presented as the definition of mastery, isn't it? Combining all the previous laws, the mystery, the perceived value, exploiting weakness, strategic withdrawal into a sustainable system for long-term influence.
Yes, hope in this context keeps the person reaching forward, constantly striving to reattain that peak feeling of affirmation or connection you provided earlier.
How is that achieved?
Through calculated attention, selectively validating their vanity, subtly lifting their dreams about what you represent or what a future with you might hold, you become the essential source of that positive reinforcement they crave.
Okay, that's the hope side. But then how do you skillfully instill the necessary fear without, crossing the line into overt abuse or cruelty? Because Machiavelli himself warned that being hated is disastrous for a ruler.
The fear described here is achieved through carefully managed reminders of your own independence and the subtle implication of possible alternatives that your attention isn't guaranteed.
So making them realize they can never fully possess you.
Precisely. That you aren't a sure thing. That they must continuously earn your presence day after day. The fear isn't a physical harm. It's that primal dread of sudden, devastating loss, of you cooling, withdrawing permanently. That sustained uncertainty keeps them deeply invested, always focused on maintaining the connection.
So the core strategy of this final law is this perfect, almost paradoxical strategic mixture. High certainty of reward sometimes, mixed with paralyzing doubt and other times.
Exactly. One evening might be overwhelming warmth and validation, making them feel completely secure. Then it might be followed by a period of emotional distance. Leave them wondering if the warmth might cool, if the spell is somehow broken, if they did something wrong.
That sounds exhausting.
It's designed to be consuming. The material states quite directly that this highly intentional mix deepens her dependence, binding the person to you through both that acute desire for the high and that subtle dread of the low. They become, in effect, addicted to the hope you provide, but simultaneously terrified of the potential withdrawal. It's described as a carefully managed neurosis, designed purely to maintain dynamic investment.
But we noted earlier, the framework itself gives an absolute warning about imbalance here, which suggests that even for a master strategist, this is incredibly difficult terrain to navigate successfully.
It's portrayed as the ultimate tightrope walk. Too much fear, as we said, destroys trust. It makes the relationship volatile, miserable, and ultimately unsustainable. It breeds resentment. But too much hope, too much certainty and comfort kills the tension. You become predictable, safe, and maybe easily discarded when the next intriguing, mysterious option appears on their horizon.
So the art lies in the mix.
Meticulously mixing both. Giving just enough of each, as the text puts it, so the heart is perpetually suspended, never fully released, but never feeling fully captured and secure either. This sustained, managed tension is what the framework defines as mastery, implying, again, not random cruelty, but a highly intentional, calculated approach to achieving a dynamic equilibrium that always favors the strategist.
That whole system, from the initial concealment right through to this strategic use of fear and hope, it creates an emotional orbit that, if executed correctly, must be incredibly difficult for the target to leave, because they're being both fulfilled and kept anxious in almost equal measure.
That's the intended outcome, yes, a state of dependent fascination.
Okay, so we've walked through the 5 laws derived from this strategic application of Machiavellian thought. Conceal intentions.
Appear as prize.
Exploit weakness without pity.
Master strategic withdrawal.
And finally, rule hearts through fear and hope. Together, they form this powerful, really comprehensive system for influencing and, well, regulating attraction.
A complete playbook, in essence.
But let's circle back hard to that warning. The text makes it crystal clear these aren't just simple tips for dating. They are explicitly framed as weapons.
Yes, the weapon analogy is used deliberately.
And weapons, when wielded carelessly or maybe unskillfully, they invariably wound the user first, don't they?
Absolutely. We really have to re-emphasize the specific dangers of misuse here, because failure in this strategy often comes from poor execution, not just a flawed premise. For instance, too much mystery doesn't create intrigue, it creates isolation.
Right. No one chases a complete phantom forever.
They'll seek solidity elsewhere. Too much withdrawal doesn't create longing, it creates genuine abandonment and pushes the person away permanently. They just give up.
And the fear element.
And too much fear, as we discussed, inevitably crosses that line into outright destruction. It creates deep resentment, hatred, not the calculated loyalty or dependence the strategy aims for. It backfires catastrophically.
So the ultimate theme threading through all of this has to be balance and rhythm.
Balance is everything. The objective, as presented, isn't crude conquest in the traditional sense. It's about achieving mastery over the dynamic rhythm of attraction. The material describes it elegantly as weaving desire like a song.
Implying the strategist dictates the tempo, the highs, the lows, never allowing passion to reach a state of static equilibrium or, conversely, complete exhaustion.
And this brings us right back to where we started this whole discussion, the absolute necessity of self-command. The mastery of these laws, the text argues, frees you from being ruled by your own passions or from being the slave of another's whims.
It puts you in a state of total intentionality.
That's the goal, which leads to the final, maybe most compelling truth offered by this analysis. I think it's worth quoting directly. To seduce is to rule, but the first kingdom you must conquer is yourself.
All the power to influence the outside world must begin with absolute internal control. Discipline over your own impulses, your own needs.
That idea that power over others fundamentally begins with power over the self. It really alters the dynamic, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It requires profound clarity about your own motivations and, let's be honest, a rather cold, objective assessment of both your own nature and the nature of others.
It does. And if desire truly is born of doubt and tension, as this framework insists, if it's fueled by the strategic engagement of weakness and vanity, we have to consider the operational reality of this system. We've kind of established that, according to the sources, it can work. But maybe the question is, how long can it work? Is it sustainable?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? The sustainability.
Right. So I want to leave you, our listeners, with one final thought to maybe mull over, focusing on exactly that, the sustainability of this level of intentionality. If this strategic approach, this Machiavellian model of attraction is so potent, does the modern quest for complete authenticity, the desire to be utterly transparent, immediately revealing, warts and all that, does that just make the authentic person easily discounted, easily discarded? Because they fundamentally violate Law 1, conceal intentions, and Law 2, appear as a prize.
Are they making themselves too known too quickly, too easily won?
Potentially. Or, conversely, is this highly strategic, calculated approach ultimately just too exhausting, too complex to sustain authentically over time? If intentionality is the key, how do you find the line between strategic self-awareness and becoming essentially a constant draining performance? A performance you maybe can't maintain without becoming utterly cold, calculating, and perhaps losing yourself entirely in the effort.
That tension between strategic power and the cost of that performance.
Exactly. Something to reflect on, that tension between power and performance. We'll leave you with that thought until our next deep dive.